I really want this to be an interactive kind of thing, so I don't want to stand up here for an hour and just be saying, this is what you should do. I want this to be interactive, so I want people to say, hey, I don't understand what you're talking about, can you give me an example? Or, this is what my business is, what would you suggest for that? If there's questions about something that I go through, feel free to ask. So, and I guess lastly, I'd like to thank all the guests for being here, so I'm excited to be, talking to everybody that's here. It's always nice to have a big crowd of people that are ready to go on a Wednesday morning. So, my background real quick. My parents are entrepreneurs. They started a business that fixes chopper boxes, which is farm equipment. So I've been around entrepreneurship my entire life. They've been doing that since 1984. They're the only people that we know of that do the repair of the chopper boxes as a main business. That's their sole business anywhere in the U.S. actually. So it's a really interesting kind of unique business. With that comes a lot of different things you have to figure out about how you get to your customers, how you keep customers, how you handle things, and like that. So my first experience was from that as I was growing up, so I was around that all the time, so you see a lot of that. So that kind of helps you because you grow up thinking, how are we going to keep people engaged and like that. After that, I went ahead and I became a computer programmer, and I worked at Land's End for 6 years. It's interesting because it wasn't so much the computer programming really makes me a great marketer, but being around Land's End did because of the things they were doing. They were doing different things with like my virtual model, and they're doing a lot of really innovative things. They also were one of the first clothing companies to really get the web right, to get internet right. So there's a lot of things that learned from that experience as well. Since the year 2000, I have been a business consultant until I got this job 6 months ago. So I've done websites, I've done search engine optimization, I've done social media, done marketing for people, helped them with operations. So just done a lot of different things as I've been working through this. I'm a scuba diving instructor, and when I was in Thailand, I was on an island where there's 6 different companies at the exact same price with nothing different, and you have to sell. And if you don't sell, you don't go diving that day, right? So you get pretty good at trying to figure out how to talk to people and ask them what's going on with themselves to get them engaged with what you're doing, to be able to have them to want to come out and dive with you, because otherwise you're not making money that next day. So you want to, and it's more fun to go diving in Thailand than it is to sit there in the warmth and not be diving. So you get pretty aggressive when you're doing there. I've also been a futures and options broker, so I had to call out to people to get business. It wasn't cold calling in a sense, but it was pretty cold calling because, or maybe lukewarm calling, because they were leads that we had from 4 or 5 years before that. And they're like, you're the new guy, we're going to give you some leads, but they're leads that are very, very, very old. So you got to go ahead and get those people interested. So you learn over the phone, which is much harder than in person, obviously. You learn to listen, you learn to ask questions, you learn to get in that. So I've done a lot of different kind of things as I've been going through this. My wife owns a massage therapy business in Platteville. We've done all the stuff I'm going to talk about are things we've done. She started out about 3 years ago at this point, a little over 3 years ago. And there was already 6 or 7 businesses in Platteville. I would say she was the busiest business within 6 months because of what we were doing and how we were pulling people in and like that. And it's in a lot of different areas. A lot of this is testing and like that. Outside of that, I've been with the SBDC for 6 months. I cover a 6-county area in southwest Wisconsin. I cover Grant, Greene, Lafayette, Iowa, Crawford, and what am I missing here? Crawford, Iowa. Yeah, Grant, Greene, yeah. Yes. So, so I cover a 6-county area for what I do for marketing. I meet with businesses all the time. So, not only am I doing this as a presentation, I've seen this in literally hundreds of businesses. When I also worked at UW-Platteville for 3 years, almost 3 years, as the coordinator of the Pioneer Launch Lab, where I help students, faculty, staff, and alumni start scalable, repeatable businesses and also local businesses. So I've literally worked with hundreds, maybe at this point, probably not the thousands yet, but hundreds of businesses I've worked with at this point to go through, and every business has a different thing. We're trying to figure out where it's at. So I've seen a lot of examples. I think one of the awesome things about what the Chamber's doing this year is, with the role with the SBDC, I have a finite amount of hours that I can spend with people to help them get going, so it's more of a strategic, this is kind of how I think you should do this. I think where it really worked well is that Sam can go ahead and help you if you're struggling with the practical, actual doing it aspect of it. So I think that could be really, really beneficial for the people that are here, and I think you have the first shot at his services because you're at this, so I think that's really great. So my biggest goal in this is to make this worth your time, right? So I want to make sure the time that I'm speaking that you're learning what's going on. If you have questions, ask. If I'm not being clear, ask, okay? So and I want you to pull something out of this. I'm going to actually start out, so this is all I have, right? So this is what I'm going off of, is this paper, right? So it's pretty open. That's why I want people to know that you can go ahead, you can ask stuff, and it can be interactive as we're going through. I was actually watching a branding thing, webinar yesterday, and it's interesting because one of the first things they started out with is that there's 40 different brand strategies that you can be using. And I'll just list a few. So PR, blogging, tweeting, printed product, conferences, advertising, referrals, affiliate marketing, strategic alliance, technology, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on, right? So marketing can be a very confusing kind of topic because there's actually so many options that are out there for you. If you go back 20, 30 years, you look at the fact that there was maybe 2, 3 options that were available to you, and most of the people were in those areas. That's not really the case now. Everybody's everywhere, right? So some of the things that Sam was saying, you got to figure out really where your customers are, and that's something that we'll get into. So one of the things that I really push people is to try tests. So if you're not sure what your market is or where they're at, try something and then test it, right? So for instance, I use my wife's business, I use my parents' business a lot because I don't have to worry about confidentiality concerns. Otherwise I'll just say I work with a business that did this or that, but I like to refer to them because it's a bit more specific and it pulls it in and you know what industry I'm working in and everything. So, because with the SBDC it's a confidential service. So what we do with my wife's business is we test things out. We try a lot of different things. We tried, I would say, about 12 to 15 different marketing channels to see how things worked, right? And what we eventually settled on is that there was a couple that worked really, really well for us, and now we plug money into those channels, right? But we tested out everything. We didn't go in with our eyes closed saying, hey, we're not trying this and we're not trying that. But the thing is if you're going to go ahead and you're going to test, you also have to track, because if you don't track what you're doing with the testing, you don't know. So I know Sam mentioned that. I recommend to business to track everything from a customer coming in. Now this doesn't have to be difficult. Everything that I want to talk to you about, I want to make as easy and as right in front of you as possible, because I feel like if it seems complicated, it's not something that you're going to do, because I know how it is for people that run businesses. I run a consulting business. I know what my wife's doing, what my parents are doing, and I know what everybody else is doing. If it's hard, it's something that you're typically not going to do, right? Just because, not that you're lazy, not that anything else, it's just that you don't necessarily have the time to do it, or it takes too much effort on top of everything else you're already doing, trying to have a successful business and handle everything. So what I really recommend to people is to make everything as simple as possible, right? So for instance, for my wife's business, we know exactly where every customer found her that comes in, because on her client intake form, there's a spot that says referral, and she checks that to make sure that if they haven't filled it in, that she asked, so that she knows exactly where every person that found her come from for advertising. That's how we know exactly what's working, what's not working. If you have a retail shop, go ahead and ask, right? So there's some magic words that will help you out with this. If you say, oh, I don't know if I want to be bothering customers, they've come in, they've already bought, from me, I don't want to take the time and I don't really want to make them feel like I'm asking extra from them. Just go ahead and say, it would really help me if, people want to be helpful. So if you go ahead and you say, hey, it helped me if you told me where you found me at, I found my business, right? They'll say, I found you through the paper, I found you through Facebook, I found you through website, right? That's quick. Just write it down, right? Have it in there. If you want to, one of the things I've had with different people is I've said, put a sheet together and just put Facebook, put website, put print, put radio, and then just put a tick each time each person does it, right? It's not that hard after you ask the customer, if you have a person that's in the front, that you say, this is where I found me, done, right? Each month, total that up, okay? That doesn't seem that hard, right? If you don't do this, it's really hard to know where you're benefiting from, where the actual dollars that you're spending are being impactful at. Because otherwise, it's, yeah, I ran this campaign. I go into a lot of businesses and I ask them, what's your marketing channels, right? So, and a lot of them say, well, I've spent money here, 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 and here. Well, what's been the most effective? Well, I don't know, right? I think that a certain percentage is coming from this and a certain percentage is coming from that. Well, how do you know? Well, that's from my gut. Well, the thing is if you got to think back on every day and try to remember what it was and figure out where things are at, typically the mind's, maybe you're kind of close, but you're probably going to be off some, right? Usually when people start tracking this, they find that it's a lot different than what they think it's going to be, and it does not take that much extra time to do it. So I would do this as simple as possible. If you want to add an extra element to it, you can ask people, and you can have a difference for whether they bought from you or how they found you. So some people will come in and it'll produce people that come in and look at stuff and don't buy. Others will do ones to do sales. So if you want, you can even have a separate category for that. Some businesses choose to do that. Others just want to go ahead and do the, hey, this is where people come from. One of the things people say is, okay, so if I'm doing something that's a radio platform, if I'm doing something that's a print one, if I'm doing something where, because online everything's trackable, right? So if you have Facebook, if you have websites, if you have all that, it's easier to track because you can tell through Google Analytics, you can tell through Facebook Insights, you can tell through, if you're advertising on Twitter and different things, where people are coming from. But it's not impossible to track where non-web platforms are coming as well. FanDuel and there's another one. Their fantasy football leagues, their daily fantasy football leagues, if anybody's watched football anytime last year, I'm sure you've seen hundreds of their ads, right? People are shaking their heads, all right? With every ad, they had a code that were there for that. Why would they do a different code for every ad? So they can track which one, right? So they know exactly where people are coming at from that. And you put something with it. I'm not the hugest fan of blanket discounts on a store just to bring people in, or blanket discounts for no real reason. Where I'm a fan of using discounts is if you're going to put some kind of code with it that you're going to bring people in, and then you're going to know they're going to mention that code because they want to have that discount from that. And now you're going to know exactly where they came to you from for that. So you can use different things. If you're doing a print advertising, you can do a coupon that you put with it. So they can just bring and hand you the coupon. Then you know, hey, I can just count how many of those are, and it's required to have it. Doing radio, TV, you can do the other codes. So you can make every media platform trackable if you choose to do so. If you don't do that, then I feel like you're not going to really ever know exactly what's working for you and what's not working for you. So is there any questions about that so far? I guess they're a quiet group, sitting back and just taking all the knowledge in. It's great. All right, so customer happiness, since we're tracking everything. I never finished the other thing too for helpful. Okay, so there's magic words, right? So can you help me out is one thing. The other thing is I would really love your advice on, right? So if you say, and if you got to mean it, you can't just be like, hey, I'd like your advice. You know, you got to be like, you know, I'm trying to figure this out, and your advice would really, I'd really like to know your advice. People love it when you need their help or when you're asking them for their advice. Typically, there's a few people who'll be like, no, I don't got time. You're going to have a few of those people, right? That's fine. But the majority of the people are going to be willing to go ahead and give you more information, right? So your customers are there. I have a lot of people after I talk to them that they say, well, I don't know this about my customer, or I don't know that about my customer. Ask. They'll tell you. Now, obviously, you don't be holding them up for 10 or 15 minutes when they're trying to get going. But if you want to have a question each week that you want to know from somebody, do a question. Just say, hey, once you start to get to the point where you know what your marketing's working, you know, what other services there that would really help you out that we could provide? Because maybe you're thinking that you want to offer 3 or 4 different new products, right? Well, how do you know? You're just guessing, essentially. If you ask them, what are the things that we're missing that you'd really like to have, you know, they can go ahead and give that to you. I like it if you try to ask as unleading the questions as possible, because it allows people to give you the true feedback, because what they might give you for feedback is something different than you would think as an option that you have in your mind as you're going through right now. So sometimes people really surprise you. The other thing is customer happiness is really important. So I think it's really nice if sometimes you follow up with customers, especially when you're newer, or if you're launching a new product or service, or if if you have new employees and you want to make sure that's going. Do a few follow-ups with people, especially the customers that you know well. You know, the thing that's nice with this, and I guess I should come back to this, I'm assuming most all of you aren't running businesses that are national franchised, large businesses where your marketing's out of your hands. I'm assuming pretty much everybody is here has a marketing budget and knows the customers they're working with and like that. So if I guess I'm wrong, then I apologize to those people, but I think most everybody's probably, is there anybody that's not in that spot, I guess? Okay, so everybody's in that spot, right? So you're going to know the people. So follow up with some people and ask them, hey, is there anything else we could be doing better? You can check reviews, and some people will post reviews. But people usually got to be pretty angry to post a review that's negative, and you have to make them angry. Sometimes people are in between, and if they're kind of they're not going to take the time to post a review, but maybe there's some basic things that you could be doing better to make them more excited, to make them want to buy more from you or to do what's there. So hopefully that makes sense for everybody. Is everybody good so far? Is there any questions on anything? All right. So when I worked at UW Platteville, one of the things we worked with a lot is Lean Startup. And I don't know if anybody's heard Lean Startup before, but essentially it's used for a lot of times software companies. It's used for businesses that are trying to become these huge businesses, right? And they got to really know their customer segments. There's some things that I've pulled from that are really beneficial for small businesses as well, and I've kind of tried to take the best parts of it and then refer it to people that are, or I use it for people that are like yourselves out there. The first one is customer segments, the importance of knowing who your customers are. So with marketing, one of the things that I've seen a lot is I went into a business that's, I'm trying to think, there was a childcare business I worked at one point that was advertising by putting a picture on a mat at a restaurant, and I asked them why, and they're like, I don't know, because the salesperson come to me, right? That was the salesperson come to them, and they went ahead and they did that because that was the buy that was there for them, right? If you don't know who your customers are and where they're at, it's not going to work. Now, I take it even a little deeper than where Sam was at with talking about age ranges for the customers. I care about that, but I want to know even more about where those people are, what's important to them in life, who those people are at their core, right? What is the thing that you have amongst the customers that are there that are commonalities? As you start getting customers in your business, you want to look at where those commonalities are. For instance, with my wife's business, with the massage therapy, we ended up finding out that UW-Platteville was big for us, and that was a really good market because people that were professors tended to be people that would be more willing to do massage. They had a little more disposable income compared to some people. It worked out really well that we were able to get there. So we focused on doing more things like chair massages, so just getting her out in front of people that were there to get that business going, and that worked out really well for us. A lot of times people to refer, we just have to ask those people to refer to other people that they knew liked them, right? So if you understand who your customer is, it's going to make the marketing that you're doing easier. It's also going to make you know where you want to go with targeting for it. With everything you want to do marketing-wise, I think you want to be targeted. Now, if you really don't know kind of what direction you're going first, you can just try testing and seeing what works. But that's a little bit tougher. I prefer to try to be targeted, take a shot, see what happens, and then come back and see what the next step is. It's important when you figure out the customers to know the buying process. This is especially important if you're selling to other businesses. Typically, if you're selling to a consumer, you have one person, there's a decision, you're good, right? If you're selling to businesses, you may not have to know, you might be the person that's using the product could be different from the person who's paying for the product, could be different from the person who is the IT department that's got to make sure that the product is okay as it comes in, who could be different from the person who is the safety person to make sure that everything's okay. You could have 3, 4, 5, 6 buyers if you're selling to a business. So if you're selling to businesses, it can be more difficult. Now, if you're selling to small businesses that are a few people, maybe you still only have 1 or 2 people, but maybe then you have to get the husband and the wife to be on the same page for doing the buy for it and like that. So you got to think through the different aspects. One that was interesting too is they were talking about this in some of the lean startup courses. One of the guys who's doing it was buying a new vehicle, and he's like, "Who's the buyer for that vehicle?" And he's thinking, "Well, it's me, and it's my wife, right?" Turns out it's not. He's like, he took the kids and they went to drive some of the different vehicles, and the kids are like, "I want to be caught dead in that vehicle, and I want to be caught dead in this vehicle." So it doesn't matter then that it's functional as the utilities there. The kids are actually making the decision whether it's cool enough of a vehicle to buy, and there's different kinds. There's things out there that you wouldn't. I didn't think about that. So it's coming through. So it can be kind of interesting as you're coming through. So you really want to know the buying process. You want to know what people are going through. Is there questions about that? So I think that's one of the more important points is to think about who your customers are, where they're at, and what's important to them. Does everybody kind of get what I'm saying, or is it kind of like you're thinking, okay, but how does that apply to me?
Okay, how does it apply to me? I'm director of a chamber. I have all these very diverse businesses.
Mm-hmm.
How do I find commonality when all I can see is differences?
Right. So I think the first thing I think with that is you got to make sure that you're having an ROI for what you're doing as a chamber service. So if you put a service out there and they pay for it and they get to the end of the year and they say that wasn't worth my money, they're not doing that again, right? So then you got to think of, okay, what's going to bring that ROI to them? Is it workshops? Is it advertising opportunities? I know with my wife, we just joined because she's opened up a business in Dubuque now as well, and we just joined the chamber in Dubuque, and she's getting a radio spot that's going out to people that's there, So we're going to go ahead and track that and see how it is. I think it's going to run, it's like a 30-second thing. It's going to run, I think, 40 or 50 times or something. So there's value there for that. Coming back into the customer level, ultimately what makes them successful is their business working, right? So I think you want to go out to the people and say, what are you struggling with, right? And then you want to try to figure out how you're the help of that. If it comes back and you're the person that's to help with that, then I think you have the business that's going to be locked into what you're doing with you. So it's coming down to, what type of people. Well, for you, it's people that own businesses, right? So financing can always be an option for people. Marketing is always a struggle for people because there's a lot to process to talk about the 40 different areas. I'm thinking of things potentially like regulation or not knowing what's going on. One of the things I really like that you guys do is the newsletter. I feel like the newsletter is really well done, so I congratulate you for that because a lot of people don't do a newsletter. What's great about the newsletter is you have the ability to send that out, and then you can track and see what people are opening and like that, so you can see what's important to people. Also, if you're doing something like let's say Facebook, you can track what gets open and what doesn't get open, so you can narrow in on what's important to the people without even having to necessarily ask them. But I would just ask about them. I'd say, hey, I don't know if you're doing surveys. I don't necessarily like surveys in the sense that it's not personal enough and it's not open and you're getting box filling. Typically, when you're trying to understand the customers, you want to ask people and you want to get qualitative answers from people. You want to get information about this is what's important to me and this is what I'm struggling with. Once you think you have patterns, that's where you use surveys. Surveys verify patterns that you find through qualitative analysis. So don't try to do quantitative analysis. Don't do box checking until you know until you have a hypothesis about what you think is going to be important to people that you're doing. Then I think it'll be a lot better. So I'll probably give you more, but it's kind of that's how if I was in that spot. I mean that's what I would look at. I think you do a lot of stuff well already, and I'm not just because I'm here. I mean there's other. Should be very careful. There's other chambers in the area that I work with who I have not worked with at all in any sense yet, and I'm not exactly sure what the people are getting for the money they're putting out. Right? I feel like that's not the case here because of some of the things you're already doing, but I think it's important to get into what's really the problem that people are struggling with and like that, and that's how you know. And I'm just asking, so. And it's nice because you have a personal connection with people, so you can ask, you're at events, you're doing business after hours, you're doing things, you can ask people, hey, is this helping you? What is it missing? And then I would see. So ask unleading questions and then see where people take it. So that's good. Is there any other businesses that are here?
So let's say, let's use your wife's massage therapy business.
Mm-hmm.
You're going into business for yourself, you have a small company and a limited budget, and you offer a service that may appeal to a huge spectrum of people.
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys go about deciding where to start putting your money, as far from an advertising, from a marketing standpoint?
Right. So it's a little unfair in my instance because I develop websites, right? So I don't do it anymore, but I did it and I know what I'm doing and I know how to do search engine optimization like that. So our first step was a website. Because I feel like if you don't have the website right, I feel like it's going to be tough for you. We find that over 50% of our business comes from search traffic, essentially, for what it is. You'll find a lot of businesses are that same way. So I see your tag Fusion Fly, so I'm sure I'm seeking exacts. I know that's what you guys do for websites. I think you got to have that if you're not sure. I think that's the very first step, right? Now, there are some businesses that can sneak by with a Facebook page without having a website, and I've seen that happen for some very small niche businesses where you only need a few customers, right? With massage therapy, you got to think about what's important to people. We typically, when we started, we targeted with Facebook because you can target very close with what's going on. We targeted down to age ranges, income ranges, geographic ranges, and like that. So in her instance, somebody from Madison's not coming to Platteville to get a massage, right? It's going to be a very targeted area. So you can target, I think we targeted within 25 miles of the Platteville area and went after certain parameters, and we took a guess at what would work and like that. And then we tested it, and we found what worked and what didn't work. We did different types of posts. We seen what people liked and what they didn't like, and then we did more of what they liked and less of what they didn't like. So it's kind of an evolving process if you're not sure. I think you want to take your best shot though. Like it was good for us because we found pretty quickly that professor type was a type that was good for us. She also, her type of massage happens to be a medical. She's the only person in Iowa that's certified in all of Grant County that's certified in the type of massage she does. So it's a more medical-based massage. So we did like a countdown of the top 5 pain issues that people experience. So she talked about TMJ, and then she talked about neck, shoulder, back is like the big ones. But kind of did a countdown of what those different things were. and seeing what drew people in. So it's kind of a pain thing and it's perspective. So we tried to figure out we could, and then as we got customers, we'd always look back at who we had for customers and what was working and what wasn't working as we pulled them in. So hopefully I'm answering that makes sense. So it kind of goes back to testing some.
How do you identify segments that you're not getting, that are potentials?
That's a good question. How do you identify it? So I think the first thing, so if there's a tool called the Business Model Canvas, and I encourage people to look that up and download that. What it has is it has customer segments, and it has you list out all the possible customer segments. I think that's a good exercise, not just from a marketing standpoint, from a business standpoint. What you're looking for is that you have the customer segments, and then I typically have, when I was working through people with the Launch Hub, this is what I do. I do this less now, but I still have used this with a few people that are struggling with selling. List all the customer segments you think are possible customer segments. Then rank them in the order, so you put who's at the top. And then I would work through for that. I would say, okay, my thing is you get 30 seconds to sell me, I'm this customer segment, what's your pitch? What are the top 3 bullet points that you're gonna give me that's the value proposition for what you do, right? So, if I'm coming into a business, and I've done this with my parents' business where we fix shopping boxes, I've direct called insurance companies to get us into working with them. And I talk about the fact that we do salvage, because they're specifically, they got these boxes that are wrecked, that they might not be able to get anything else for money out of it. All of a sudden, we're willing to pay them $500,000, a couple $1,000s that they were going to get zero for before. Well, that's a big value prop for them, right? So that's the first thing I mentioned. But yeah, we also fix boxes. This is another thing that we do. And they're like, oh, but can you fix much? Go on. And then my third thing with them typically is that we have inventory as well. So I go through what I think is most important, ranked in order for them. That's a little bit more service, but it can apply to others as well. Once you have that, you got to figure out, obviously, who you have as customers. So I think listing that out and figure out what's important to those people and then how you're going to reach them from a marketing channel. Hopefully you have the people identified. If you advertise and you get a different type of people than you're expecting to get, then you got to ask yourself why, what's going on, what's important, and just figure out what that, figure out a few questions, ask a question, and just follow up and keep kind of, again, you want to be there's a line, right, where you get to the point where you're annoying customers, and there's a line where it's at, and you want to be doing interviews with them that are 20 minutes long, but if you have a different question that you cycle through that you're asking, maybe that'll help you out for it. Short of that, I guess it's getting an outside opinion probably from somebody. So that's kind of what I do with the SBDC, is helping businesses find their markets and like that. But I think that's another point where Sam was talking about, it's nice to have a second set of eyes look at things. And I think sometimes you can be like, how come you're not marketing to this group? And like that. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay. If it does, sometimes you give me a question and then I got all this stuff going on in my head from all these different things that I've done and I kind of take it a different direction. If I do and I don't answer the basic question that you're, always feel free to be like, hey, I still don't quite get that. So, because I want to make sure I'm being really clear for everybody.
Two questions. First, what was that item you recommended to download?
Business Model Canvas.
Where can you get that?
It's online for free. So, it's just a tool that you can download. And it's something, I don't know if you've seen that, Sam?
Is that through the Small Business Administration?
No, it's actually through, it's a private individual that did that. But they're pretty open with what they're doing. It's kind of on lean startup and all that.
Yeah, no, I have seen, I've used it once or twice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because it boils it down to, essentially, with business, a lot of times business is complicated, right? And I get that. But it boils down to, if you know who your customers are, you know what's important to them, you know where they're at to market to them, and you know how they want to pay, if you hit those 4 things right, you have a business, right? Obviously, you have to be able to make money after you've done those things. But if you hit those things, that's the most important part. So, I like that because on the right side of the canvas is your customer segments, your value proposition, your revenue, and then your customer relationship, which is your, how you're going to get customers, keep customers, and grow customers. So I think it's a pretty interesting tool. All right. So value proposition. You want to know your competition, and you want to know your differentiation. If you don't know how you're different than another business that you're competing with, you're probably not. Okay? If you can't explain it, then you got to figure it out, right? So one of the things I always tell people is it's always, when I meet with them, it's always your business, right? So you can do whatever you want. You can take whatever direction you're at. That's the nice thing of having the business, is you're the person making the decisions, right? When I ask people what the differentiation are and they say price, I'm almost always instantly worried, okay? If you're only differentiating on price, it's a race to the bottom in what you're doing, right? So if you're trying to be the cheapest and that's it, that's a worry. I'm also worried when people tell me that they're going to have the best of everything and they're going to be the cheapest. That's actually maybe a worse answer, because you can't do all of that. And even if you do have the best of everything and you're the lowest price, the problem is when you tell customers, and they're going to look other places. Typically, most customers aren't going to just go to one place, buy, and do that. I mean, how many of you guys, is there anybody in here that just buys on a whim? I'm guessing not, unless maybe you're just out a day shopping or something. But if it's any serious decision at any point, that's not how people buy. They, like, as you talked about, 88% of people looking at reviews online, they're going to research, they're going to look, they're going to try to figure all this out, right? So you really want to know what's important. You want to know how you're differentiating. And if you do the thing where you're the best but you're the lowest price, people are going to look around and they're going to ask what's wrong, what am I not seeing, and they're not going to trust it. People infer price as value. So you have to be really careful about that. If you have the lowest price, people will typically perceive you as the lowest price option, right? Which makes sense, but it also, that brings other connotations to it that you may not be wanting as you're coming through. The majority of the people that I've worked with who have been struggling, who were individual, for instance, I worked with a seamstress, and I actually told her to raise her prices, was the very first thing that I had her do, right? So we raise the prices, we get right who are working for customers, we don't work with the customers that she doesn't want to work with, have a contract for people up front, handle the business professionally, and she's done a lot better with where she's at, right? A lot of times if you have it be a more professional process, you're going to look at where you're at kind of in the whole buying chain of everything. And if you have it be a very professional price process, you can go ahead and you can make it work really well. So the pricing is really important. Hopefully that's making sense to anybody. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. So there's this concept called a sales funnel. I don't know how many of you have seen a sales funnel before. Typically I draw it for people when I'm meeting with them individually, but I'm not gonna, okay, so Sam's seen it. I'm not gonna go ahead and draw that up here. I'm just gonna tell you about the parts of it, right? So there's 3 parts to it. There's get, there's keep, and there's grow, okay? So this is really important. So the first part's get. So most everything we've talked about so far, and most everything that people think about when they think about marketing is get. It's how do I bring customers in the door? How do I get in front of them? How do I create awareness? How do I create education? How do I do all this stuff, right? And it's important, but it's only 1/3 of the entire marketing part of this, right? The second part's keep. Keep is really important because once you've gotten the customer, you want to make sure you keep them, assuming they're not a horrible customer. So if they're a horrible customer, if they're causing you, so you talked about the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers, right? In most businesses, almost everywhere you'll see that. I have not been to a business so far where I haven't seen that to be close. And a lot of times it's actually more 90-10. It's more 90% of your revenue comes from 10% of your customers, but 80-20 is the rule they go by. It's Pareto's law. Also, 80% of your problems typically come from 20% or less of your customers, okay? So there's people that are causing you all kinds of stress. You got to really ask yourself, is this the right person for me to have? I've advised people before not to keep customers, to let those ones go, to make sure you're having better customers. That comes back into the price. If you're the lowest priced option, you typically pull in the lowest priced customer, who is typically, hopefully nobody takes offense to this, the worst customer you're going to have because all they care about is price. They don't care about everything else that's there, and all the other work that you put into it isn't important to them. They just want the lowest price. Keep's important because if you have customers you want to keep, it is so much cheaper to keep those customers and get them to buy again or to have them work for you to tell other people than it is to acquire new customers. Acquiring new customers can be very expensive. It can be very difficult. If you get people that are in your system that have bought from you once, they've gotten over this mental hurdle of buying from your business, right? The fact that they trust your business, that they're willing to work with your business, they're doing that. There's a psychology thing. I'm really into psychology, but I try not to do too much psychology stuff. But there's cognitive dissonance, right? So once you've made a decision, your mind has to be right with that decision, and if you're not, you're at conflict all the time. Well, once somebody's bought from you, they've got settled enough in their mind that now they've basically bought in, and now they're with you, right? So you have to do something typically fairly bad to get them to not want to be with you anymore or not fulfill. So a lot of times, before I start doing any new marketing strategy, I actually come back to people and say, who are your current customers? Are you fulfilling properly for your current customers? Have you asked them if they need any more of your service? For instance, with the massage business, we sometimes send out emails that, oh, we haven't heard from you in 6 months. Is everything okay? Is there anything this way? That typically generates sales because they're there, they bought once, and they've just thought, oh yeah, I kind of did this once, I got a massage, and then I kind of forgot about it. Well, now they come back and they do another massage, and sometimes then those people end up being regular customers. I'm sure most of the things you're doing here, if you've had them as a customer once, they're more likely to be a customer for you again. The key part's important because you got to think about all those things. You got to have the customer service right. You want to make sure customer touch points are good. So you got to make sure the people that are servicing your customers really know what they're doing and really caring about what's going on. The third part of the Get, Keep, Grow is the grow. Grow means that you're taking the people that you have as customers and you're utilizing them to either pull more revenue from them or to ask them to refer other people to you. That can be done through word of mouth, which is free, or referral, which is you're paying them to do. One of the more interesting referral things I've seen is DirecTV does a thing online where they're like, you refer a friend and you get $10 off your next 10 bills, and they get $10 off their next 10 bills, right? I use that as an example a lot, just because I find that really interesting, and I think that's something that's appealing on both ends. It's not that thing where I refer you and I get something, but you get nothing. It's more that thing where we both get something, and then it doesn't feel so kind of seedy. It's like it's something that you actually want to do and you're both benefiting from that. I think that's kind of a cool thing. You can do upselling, you can do stuff like that. I'm always a little careful with upselling because I don't want it that you're buying something and then we're trying to throw some other thing on top of the person that they don't really want. Upsells are only good if it's something that's useful for their customers. I also encourage people that if you're not the right business for that customer, to tell them that. I think that's going to get you a lot more in the long run than it is in the short term. So it's not always just about getting a sale for somebody if it's not the right situation for them. So, and if it's not, I've told people before to recommend another business to do that. With my wife's business, they have a thing where if they're not available, they will tell the people, the massage therapists in the area, and that point to go ahead and refer people back and forth. So the people in the area are getting the benefit from it. And you think as a whole, if people are doing massage therapy, all the massage therapists will do better, right? It's nice if you can have those relationships with competitors. They're not just trying to beat each other's throats for what you're doing. Kind of makes it nicer if that's the case for where you're at. And then virality is something that people talk about a lot. So with virality, essentially that is everybody's trying to get something viral online, right? They're trying to post a picture and have it go viral. They're trying to post a video and have it go viral. If you're trying to get virality, it typically doesn't happen. The only thing that I think you can do to really encourage that is if you are working with your customers, you have your customers, go ahead and ask them to do stuff. So when we do Facebook giveaways for my wife's business, and we ask the customers to share, comment, or like the Facebook post that's out there for it. And when they do that, they get entered in a drawing for a free massage, right? So a 30-minute massage they get for free for doing this. And we say when we get to a certain amount of likes, we'll do a giveaway for that. Now Facebook's been back and forth whether you can do that, whether you cannot do that, and we've always been in the time when we have been. I'm not sure where they're at now. I'm sure if they're against it a month ago, they're for it now. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but it's an instance where it's at. We've actually taken a step further, and then we pick 10 finalists, and then we put them online, and we say the person that gets the most comments, likes, and shares gets an extra entry for the free massage. And that's actually typically our biggest post, because now you're helping your friend get an extra entry, which gives them an extra chance to get that free massage, and we get a lot through that. So a lot of times you can do stuff that's pretty cheap. I can't remember which one of you guys was asking me about it, working through marketing and not having a huge budget. Was it Al? Yeah. There's some things you can do that you can get a little bit of virality because you're putting something out in front of people that they want, and then you can say, hey, this is something to do, and you get customers to do some of the work for you. The other thing is if you want people to refer or to give out your business card, you got to ask them. They're not just going to do it without thinking about it. Typically, a few people might who really are, and typically it's people who are friends with you as well. They might refer your business. Past that, if you don't ask customers, they're not going to refer your business for you because they're just not thinking about it because they leave your service or your retail shop or wherever, and then they're on doing the next thing, right? But if you just say, hey, if you know somebody that needs this help, would you mind giving them a few business cards? And you give them a few business cards, okay, and then maybe if you do that, obviously not every time, but if you do that here and there with people, a lot of times you'll find that you'll have that come back to you. So, and you can track that, and you can see what's working and what's not working. Is it something where, you do some kind of giveaway where the person that refers it every so often gets a free something. I mean, you can do things like that that are there as well. So get, keep, grow. you want to think about all three. If you focus on get only, it's to the detriment of your business. You really want to think about the keep part, especially, and then I typically, the keep is the first thing I work with when I go into work with people, to make sure that their current customers are kept before we try to do any new crazy things, because a lot of times there's money being left on the table with the customers that they already have. Does everybody get that? Is there any questions? All right. So I'm going to talk about brand and message. I'm not the best person in the world to talk about brand. It's not something that I've done a ton of research in, but I kind of have, most of the things I do with this are pretty tactical. I want to think exactly what you're trying to do, and I'm trying to think, how is it that you want to be right in front of your customers? One thing I like about this is a quote by Jeff Bezos, which I heard from the webinar that I was at yesterday. A brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, right? So that's your brand. The brand isn't something you can just shout to people. It's something you got to have other people talk about you as, okay? And another quote is, if you don't define your brand, someone else will. I think that's really important, because if you don't try to figure out what's important to you, nobody else is going to know, right? So I actually am a pretty big believer in like mission statements or value statements. You're saying, these are the things that I want to know, and this is what we're going to do. Typically don't want anything that's really long. You want something that's easier to remember. This is what we live by. This is who we are. And then you want to make sure you're applying that to everything you do, right? So if you're somebody who's, customer service is really important to you, you're going to make sure that that's through everything that you're doing. You want to have the right people that are there, that are handling customer service at the touch points that are there for you. One thing I think is really important is names. A lot of people that pick names for businesses that I don't know where it comes from, or and it's confusing to people, right? So, and we might be we're probably on the much more boring end of it, but my wife's business is Platteville Massage Therapy and Dubuque Massage Therapy, right? Now that's probably the most boring name there is, but if you search for it online, all of a sudden we have a pretty big advantage now, right? If you're trying to remember where it's at, it's like, oh, what's the name of that business? It's a massage in Platteville. Oh yeah. All right, it makes it easier, right? So sometimes people really complicate it and have this really convoluted name, you're not Accenture, you're not all these different Vonage, you're not all these crazy things that are trying to be all across the states and have, spend millions of dollars on advertising. You're a local business, right? So you probably want to have the name be something that people are going to look for. I think about the keywords that you're going to have that are there for your business when you're picking your name. I think before you ever pick a name, you better make sure that the website's available, you better make sure the Facebook's available, you better make sure that it's available in the state. There's a search for it that you can do on the state website. You gotta make sure that you can get that. I typically even check Twitter, even though I haven't really gotten to the point where I've had a lot of great successful things on Twitter, but I think at some point maybe that's gonna be the thing. But for sure, website, Facebook, and then making sure that this is the name you can have. And then ask some other people about the name and see what people think. I mean, I made a mistake when I did a name one time with the business that I had a couple businesses ago when I was doing consulting, and I called it Fund Unity because I thought I was going to do this thing where I was going to pull the community for a funding type of thing. But some people read it as Fundunity, right? And so it's like, when you ask people, that's what you pull out from that, and I didn't, you just like, I had a couple people say that, and I'm like, damn. So, and I didn't ask people ahead of time. So I learned, I got a name, I'm going to go ask some people, I'm going to see what they think, right? And I think that was the point where I'm like, okay, I'm not Verizon, I'm not all these other crazy companies that are trying to spend millions of dollars. Small local business. So, that's, is there any questions on anything so far? Is this all making sense to everybody? Hopefully this is tactically, you feel like you're getting, I'm trying to make this as like, write what you have to have. I'm not trying to be strategic or all these extra things. I want things that you're going to be able to take something from this and do something with. So hopefully this is helping everybody out. Where are we at for time?
It's 10:08.
Okay, so I better get going. I'll wrap this stuff up a little quicker here because I think we want to be done around, like 10:30. I think is where we're at with it. Okay.
We're kind of flex. We got through until 12:30.
Okay, so I want to make sure the panel has plenty of time as well though. So I'll speed this up a little bit here. Make it easy to buy. So this is one of the things that a lot of businesses don't. I go into businesses, and I've worked with business before. I'm going to use this as a child care business I worked with, not since I've been doing the SBDC. It's been several years ago. They had $20,000 of uncollected accounts receivable, which is a problem, right? So everybody knows that. If I say that, I see some people with some face like, oh my gosh. That's bad, right? And you have that, people aren't going to pay you. And I asked them why they didn't take credit card, what they told me is, well, I might lose 3%. Okay, so there's some people that are laughing a little bit here, because I would rather have 97% than 0%, right? The math on that's solid, I'm pretty sure. 97 is better than 0. All right, make it easy for people to buy, and make it easy for you to get paid, right? So, you know, some businesses. So it's interesting because when my wife started a business, we didn't necessarily take credit card. We have since started doing that. We also make it so people can buy gift certificates right online. They can do a lot of the stuff online and have it sent. And our gift certificate sales have skyrocketed because of doing that, right? So it's something that's there. It makes it easier for people. You want to let the customer do business with you how they want. If they want to book something with you via the phone, let them. If they want to do it via Facebook, let them. If they want to do it by email, let them, right? However they want to come into you, don't try to force them into one channel. I know it makes it tougher, and it's harder to keep up, and I understand that, because I've, business to work with that do that. But if you cut off a channel, you say, I'm not taking people through this channel, well then you probably cut off a certain amount of customers that aren't going to come in through. Like we were talking about before, not knowing where they're at. If you cut off channels, you're not going to know where those customers are coming, that are there that could possibly come into it. Think about the customer touch points, how to make best use of them. I mentioned this a few times, but it's really important. You only have a certain amount of people in your business. If you have if it's business is more than you, you only have a certain amount of people that are actually with the customers, right? The people that are with your customers are your brand ambassadors. If you get all the back end stuff right and you have the worst person doing customer service for you, your business is going to struggle or fail, okay? So if you don't have people that care about your business, that know what you're trying to do, that understand the mission that's there for you, that are actually talking to the customers, that's a real problem. It's to the point where I typically would try to have, if people are a business in your small business, maybe you have 2-3 people, if you're not able to be with those customers, I think you want to follow up and you want to make sure they're getting the service that they want. They talked about following up with customers before. Do some calls and make sure they're happy with the service that they're getting as they come through. Complete the sale. So this kind of hits some of the other things that were there. It's about how you fill the order of service. Make sure you fill the order of the service. I've had businesses that I've worked with that are asking me about marketing, but yet are 2 weeks behind on their voicemail and 3 weeks behind on their emails, okay? Marketing for the sake of having more leads and having more customers, but not fulfilling with your current clients is awful, okay? That's exactly the thing you don't want to be doing, because you're bringing more people in who are going to get worse customer service, who are going to be more pissed off, who are never going to buy from you again or want to use you as a service, right? If you can't fulfill with what you have, don't market. Just go ahead and do what figure out how to fulfill first, and then that's where you want to do the other stuff. That's why I talked about keep is the most important thing, and that's where I start out with people when I go to work with them. So it's existing customers, then it's leads, then it's marketing, right? So existing customers fill that first. If you have leads that are there that you haven't been able to chase that down, and then figure out where you're going to market. That's the order of priority, I think, for things. Importance of customer satisfaction. I've hit this already. We've already talked about online reviews. One other thing I will mention is I think it's really important if you have a bad review to follow up in a positive way. So you need to be monitoring online, even if you don't think you're on Yelp or think you're on wherever, you are probably. If you have a bad review, you want to make sure that you follow it in a positive way. Don't shout down the people because it makes you look really awful, okay? Even if they're completely incorrect and they're awful, and it happens, right? So my wife's business has one-star review. It happens to be from a competitor who's never actually been into her before, right? You want to make sure you follow that up. So I have never been able to talk her into doing that, but it's a 1-star with no text, so there's not a whole lot you can say about it. It's interesting because all the ones that are everything that's 4 or 5-star are people that have been there. There's not a single one below that. The people that are 3 stars below are people that have never been there. So they're competition trying to take down their Facebook ranking because people look at that. She's still like 4 or 5, so it's good. So
so what would you say?
I would come in and so if it's somebody that's actually bought from you and you've actually made a mistake, be upfront about it, admit the mistake, and figure out how you can make it right for the person, right? People are going to appreciate that when you look through. That's the first thing. If it's somebody who's never bought from you before, I would say, I'm not sure I have records of that, but if it's a problem, please contact me at so-and-so, right? You want to take that discussion, you want to answer, you want to respond, and you want to take it offline as soon as possible, right? If you get into things where you're having post wars back and forth with people, that is not what you want at all. It's going to make you look awful. It's really hard not to come off awful unless you take care of it and you look like you're going to be the person that you want to handle. You want to show that you're the business that if something goes wrong, you're going to be helpful to people and then take it offline as soon as you possibly can.
How do you take it offline?
Tell them to call you at this number or email you at this number or,
But
you know.
once you have a review on there, that isn't.
It's on. It's going to be on. Yep. Yeah, I mean, if it's Facebook, you could theoretically shut down your whole review system. But then you don't have a ranking, and that's not so great. Just if your ranking's high. I mean, if you get to the point where your ranking's low, then it's a better option. If you get to the point, you know, if you buy a business, this is one thing I've seen. If you buy a business from somebody else and they have horrible rankings, I would think about changing the name and restarting it, depending on how big of a following you're losing for that. But if you have negative reviews, you may just want to change names and go with that. You know, if it's your business and you have negative reviews, then make sure you make the changes you need, then rename your business and do that. So, because otherwise you're just going to be in the same spot down the road for what you're doing. But yeah, get people offline. If you have a fault, admit the fault and apologize. And don't just say, I'm sorry that you feel this way, because people see through that. It's BS. You want to be, we apologize if this was an error that we made. This is what we want to do to make it better for you. If it's not, yeah, just try to say, hey, I don't think we've, you know, you want to be positive.
I think you need to avoid canned responses too. I remember going online to check out a hotel and it was canned response after canned response.
Yeah.
And it was obvious that it was automated and
Yeah, they don't care.
They didn't care.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. So, has anybody had any? So one thing we had that was interesting, I don't know who this person was, but we put a Facebook post out there for, you can tell we use Facebook a lot, so that's one of the things we found that has good ROI for us. So with the Platteville massage business, we just happen to use Facebook a lot. She put out a thing for a Mother's Day gift certificate, and she had some guy that talked to her come online and said something about the rampant commercialization of Mother's Day. And it's like, whoa, it's like, you know, we're a one-person business. We're not, you know, not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's, but we're not McDonald's. You know, I mean, we're a one-person business. Just saying, if you want to buy a gift certificate for your mom for Mother's Day, you know, it's an option, right? That's all we're doing right here, right? So, and it's hard to stay above the fray. I had to think that out, because my first thing was I was angry. Because it's like, you know, this is some random person who's not buying from our business, who's just basically trying to flame online and get things going and like that. So, you know, I had to think through how it was, and I was like, you know, my response was essentially, well, you know, we're here, we're a one-person business. You know, we want to make sure that we're trying to help everybody out. You know, this is something you can do and like that. And just, you know, he responded once and then I just was like, okay, just taking this offline. If you want anything, give us a call, so on and so forth. I think that's the right way to handle that. But it's weird. Sometimes you get the things, people are just weird. And you get some stuff online that just, you can't, you just do your best. Do your best, be as authentic as you can. Try to be as nice as you can and just, you know, people will see through that. I think if they're looking through the reviews, they'll see, hey, you tried to handle it the right way, and they'll give you credit for that. Is there any other questions about that? That's an interesting little area. There's actually firms that go out and now do positive reviews for people that you pay them to do positive reviews for you. So that's a pretty interesting little thing that you could do to get going. I'm not sure if anybody's doing that here, but that's something I've heard of before. And you want to ask your customers to review you as well. Make sure you ask them so they actually go out online and put the reviews out there. You want them putting it on. You want them putting it on Yelp. You want them putting it on Yellow Pages online. Even though almost nobody's going to find you through Yellow Pages online, it's actually pretty highly ranked for a website, and it's a review other people might look for. Website basics. I'm just going to hit this quick because I know that we have some people here that are going to be talking about this as well. When you buy a website from somebody, you want it to be search engine optimized, which means that it can be found. You want it to be mobile optimized, which means it works on smartphones, because most people are using their smartphones to surf now, and actually buy a lot more in the last few years. That's really picked up. And you want to make sure that it's a content management system so you can update it yourself, right? Not that you're going to put a big, you know, logo on it, you're going to do all this other stuff. It's so you can go ahead and put new content out there for it. So you want it to be easy enough so you can go ahead and do the basic updates. So you don't have to necessarily be paying every time that you need to change a few words here or there. You want to go ahead and have that, or so you can add pictures, things like that. I'll let the website one go, and I know, you know, they're talking about websites, so you can get into that more as you go as well. Search engine optimization, when you do that, you want to make sure you're using words naturally. So you want to make sure that you're identifying the keywords which are important to your business. That's about knowing your customers and knowing how they find you. Then you want to make sure you're using those words not just online but offline as well. So that if, I keep using the massage example, but pain's a big thing. So you want to make sure you're talking about pain management. You want to make sure you're talking about relaxation. You want to talk about that kind of stuff. So, so social listings, I don't know if this is officially a category, this is what I call them. When I'm trying to, so search engine optimization is complicated, right? It is very, very complicated to get your website to the top. There's different ways that you can do this. One of the things that I like to do is I want to make sure that I'm on all the social listing platforms. So this is things like Sam was talking about TripAdvisor, if you're a hotel or if you're a restaurant. If you're, pretty much anything at this point, Yelp's a big one. I already mentioned Yellow Pages is out there. You want to make sure you're on Google Places. So if somebody's trying to find you on a map, that you're actually on that map. If you're not on that map, people might not find you. If you're a tourist and you come into an area that you don't know, most people are going to be looking at their smartphone at this point to see where it's at. And they're going to do restaurants near me. They're going to do, the shop near me. And it's going to bring up certain ones that are there. If you're not on the maps for the places that people look online, you don't exist, right? So maps, being on the maps is one of the things that's there. So it's things like Google Places. I think it used to be Yahoo Local. I think they've kind of merged with Bing now, so there's some different stuff going on there. But it's making sure you're on the pages. The easiest way to do this is to go through and do a Google search for what you think the keywords are, and then look at the first 3 pages, not 3 entries, the first 3 pages of what's listed. And if it's not your business or competitor business, if it's an aggregator, so if it's a Yelp, if it's whatever, see if you're on there. Click on it, see if you're on there. If you're not, go ahead and get yourself added. If you can't, find somebody that, if you don't know how to get yourself added, it's typically a fairly easy process. But if you can't get yourself added, find somebody who's a techie that can help you out with it. Or that's something I'm sure Sam could help you out with over the summer. Maybe I shouldn't be signing work, but but that's probably something that can, they can help out with, or you can talk to other people that you know or whatever. But make sure you're on all those sites. It's free. It's free to be on Yelp. You can do advertising to the sites as well, but it's free to be on there. It's important for multiple reasons. One thing is a lot of people look at that, and there's apps on people's phones, and they'll go look at that. So Yelp's a big one, right? I already talked about the maps. You want to be wherever people are at. So if people do a search, I also like to have our video. We did videos for Flatville Massage, and we did a lot of images for Flatville Massage. So if you think of Google and you're doing a search, you got the search, you got the pictures, you got the videos, you got the maps. I want to be on all those, right? I want to be anywhere people are looking for me at. It doesn't take as long as it probably sounds like it does, but it's kind of a thing of a process of where you want to be at. The way that I narrow it down, that's why I say do the first 3 pages, do a couple different searches for how you think people would find you, and then make sure you're on those aggregator sites. I would say total work time, you're maybe 5 to 10 hours to do that. If you're really slow at it, if you're fairly quick, maybe to 5. If you're new to it all, maybe it's to 10. I think you can do that pretty quick. Typically for me, we can do that. For my wife and I, we do it in a couple hours when we're doing 2 businesses. So you get quicker as you go through, and then you'll understand what's out there, and then people ask you, you're on those sites. And then it helps with your search engine optimization, because when you have backlinks from those sites to your site, because you'll put in the information, you'll put in your phone number, you put in all that, it'll make your website and your Facebook actually rank higher. So it has multiple benefits that are there for you, and I think it's really important. So it's not just about the customers you'll get, it's about the help you'll have with your website that's there.
Quick pitch for the chamber, because you're all chamber members, you are on the chamber website. So often that's the first place that they're visiting, that's the first place people look, or if they Google search.
Yeah.
Your business may come up in the chamber website before it comes up on yours. So make sure what you have on my website is correct. And if there's more that you want on there, you can do that.
Yeah, information does change. Make sure you save those passwords and stuff so that you can go back in and change the information as it comes through, and make sure you're updating the sites. That's where it's important to have Google Analytics, because then you'll know the chamber's referred 10 different people to me. I better make sure that when I'm updating things that it's there. I probably don't want to go. Google Analytics is pretty cool. If you don't have it set up on your website, you need to, because you want to know where everybody's coming from for it. The last thing I was just going to hit was social media marketing. I have these slides that I got yesterday from this brand webinar that I went to, and it's just some interesting numbers, I think, which helps kind of quantify some of this. So Facebook, 42% of people on Facebook are 18 to 34. So if you're going for that demographic, That's 42% of their customers. 18% of their customers are 55 to 65 plus. 66% of people from 15 to 34 use Facebook, so 2 out of 3 people use Facebook, and 58% of those are female, right? So this is just some basic information I thought was kind of useful. There's 2 other ones I have. So Twitter, 44% of their customers are from 18 to 34. And only 7% are from 55 to 65. So if you're going after an older demographic, that's not necessarily the spot to be in. And 69% of moms log in once a day, which is interesting. So I did
During nap time. Twitter?
somebody say
nap time?
oh during nap time. Yeah, during Twitter, 69% of moms log into Twitter once a day. So I don't know if there's moms at a certain age. I'm guessing it's a certain age range they're looking at for that, but. One other one, and this one's a pretty interesting one, is Pinterest. Pinterest is 80% women, so their platform is, and it's ages 25 to 54. If people don't know what Pinterest is essentially a site with a lot of pictures on there, and you can go through and you can pin different things and have different things and recipes and all this interesting stuff. I don't really understand it, but I have to know what it is, so I spent some time out looking at it like that. There are it's interesting because it's like homes, arts and craft, food, women's fashion, inspiration, how-to, all that kind of stuff. So I think I want to wrap this up with kind of this arching thing. There, as I talked about at the beginning, there's, I listed some of them, but there's, well over 40 different types of brand strategy you can do. You got to know your customer, and then make sure that when you know your customer, you figure out where they're at, and then try tests. Don't put tons of money into something and not have an idea if it's returning money for you. Try some tests, try testing this, try testing that. I think be open to doing different things, and then just make sure you're following it up, you're tracking what's going on. If you're not going to track the stuff, then it's going to be impossible for you to know it's working and like that. So I really emphasize the tracking. Make things as easy as for yourself as possible to get done, or pulling somebody else will help you. Use the resources that are available. I can help you from a strategic standpoint. I can help you with a few questions, but Sam's there for you for a strategic and a tactical standpoint of kind of where things are at like that. And then you guys are part of a business community, so ask other business owners what's working for them, what they've done, where they're experts at. A lot of times if you just ask people, can you help me with this? A lot of times people really want to help you, because they want to be helpful and like that. So, any questions about anything as we're going through? You guys are full of knowledge now. You have a satiated, full of knowledge look. I'm hoping, or it's the bored look. Either way. So, all right. So I think we're going to do a break now, and then when we come back, we'll do the panel. So, so go ahead and take a 10.
It's like 10 minutes. Also, the panelists over here by the table. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.